morning. This is day 2 of talking about compositional layout. So today we'll talk about creating multiple sections using compositional layout. Yesterday, we built an app using one section. We had an enum and we had one case in there, one section. Today we'll create multiple sections. So we'll start off by creating an enum and we'll have 2 sections. One is going to be a grid layout and the second will be a single sort of list layout. Our objective for this particular lesson is to use Compositional Layout Provider to configure various sections. So the code is going to be a bit similar to what we did yesterday, but now we'll be using the Compositional Layout Provider, which takes a closure and it gets called for every section that you have, and you're able to customize each section. We're also subclass UI collection reusable view. We've done that before using flow layout. We'll do it again. So this is one way to create a header for your section in a collection view or a footer view. So today we'll create a header view using UI collection reusable view. So we'll subclass a view. The view inherits from UI collection view reusable view, and it's like any other view we do programmatically. We'll go ahead and we'll use this new API here, which is called NS Collection Layout Boundary Supplementary Item, to create our header view. We'll add that header view to the section's boundary supplementary items property, which takes an array. So for your section, you could add multiple items to it. For example, you could add a header, you could add a footer, you could also add a badge icon or any sort of like supplementary view you want to add to your item cell. And we'll also configure the data source to dequeue the supplementary view. Because our collection view, you could dequeue a cell, which is the items for the collection view, and you could also dequeue the header or a footer supplementary view for that particular section. So this is the objective of the day in the app that we build. So to overview what we'll be doing, we'll set up an enum here. It's going to be case iterable, so we could use some sort of for loop or some way to get all the cases of the items here. We'll have a column count. This is going to be very important for when we use the section provider to know what section we're dealing with in order to configure the group accordingly. Because the group will be either a grid, which is 4 columns here, or it will be a 1-column list. In that case, we'll return 1. So here we're using a computed property on our enum case to return some sort of int value. Like we did yesterday, we'll declare our collection view using storyboard, but feel free to test it out using programmatic views. I haven't added a challenge here. I normally try to add a challenge, but the challenge will be to add a 3rd section, whichever way you want to design it. But really, it's important for us to practice as well, even if this is not core curriculum stuff that we're doing here, but it's important to practice this because going forward, if you're doing UI kit, most probably will be better for you to use compositional layout as opposed to flow layout. It will just make the work way easier for you and you'll be able to be more flexible with the layouts you do. So for the challenge, again, we'll have 2 sections, but challenge yourself to add a 3rd section and design it whichever way you want. So going down the list here, yesterday we did not use the type alias. I want to reintroduce that again so that we understand why we use it. We use it instead of writing UI collection view diffable data source everywhere we need it. As far as our data source setup, not the NS diffable data source, but the UI collection view data source. Anywhere we're using this, instead of using this, we could interchange it, or we could use a moniker, or here we call it a type alias called data source. So it replaces this whole line of code here. So instead of saying data source : UI collection view diffable data source, we'll just say data source here, and it refers to that type alias. So yesterday, when we created our layout, we created our layout in 4 steps. We had our item size, we had our item, we had our group size, our group, we had our section, and we returned the layout. Today, because we're having multiple sections, we'll be using what's known as the section provider or the compositional layout section provider And here, this takes a closure. So our same sort of UI collection view flow layout class, right? It takes in a closure here as opposed to yesterday. So yesterday we did not do this. Yesterday we just passed in the section. But today we'll actually be using this closure here, which has two arguments. The first argument is a section index, which tells you what section it has. In our case, we have two sections. So we have 0 and 1 as the index. And what's also provided to us is the layout environment. What does the layout environment mean? Well, if you want to also design differently on your iPad, for example, like a bigger device as opposed to the iPhone, you could know what the layout environment is, or you'll get the layout environment value. And from that value, you'll say, okay, if it's an iPad, instead of having three columns, I want to have 6 columns. So the only way you could get to know that is through this layout environment variable. So if it's on an iPad, you'll know, okay, I have more space to play with, so I could add more columns to it. Does everybody get that? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the one thing we'll be using today is the section index. We won't use the layout environment today, but know what the layout environment is used for. We'll keep going down there and we'll have our section, which is our Enum type. And again, we'll find out what section type we have. Is it the grid or is it the single column? So from that, we'll be able to know what columns we have. Is it 1 column or is it 4 columns? Well, if it's 1 column, we'll just render 1 column. So here we start off by saying our item size will take up the full width and the full height. But remember, we could override that with this initializer here, which provides the columns. Like in yesterday, even if you provide some item size and you use this initializer, it's going to override how many items you have per column. Not per column, but how many items you have in your columns, right? So if you started off saying, I want to take the entire row, and you come here and you say, I want to have 4 columns, it's not going to take the entire group. It will break it up into 4 columns. So this is what we'll be doing here. At step 5, what are we doing here? We're basically saying, if the column count equals to 1, then yesterday we did not use absolute. I can't remember if we used absolute dimensions, but I don't think we did. But today we'll be using absolute dimensions. Absolute dimension basically means, give me a hard-coded number. This number is not going to change. It's 200 points. So we'll make our height 200 points. If it's 1 column, we'll make it 200 points tall. If it's not that, we'll make it fractionally width based on the section. Remember, the group gets its size from its container. The group's container is the section. So in that case, we'll say section, whatever your width is, we want to be a quarter of your width. So 25% of your width will be the height. We go on to set up our group size, which is our fractional width. In that case, we just take up the entire span of the section, our container. And whatever height dimension we pass in here, it's going to be coming from line 5. We go on to use our horizontal group. And as I said, as opposed to what we did yesterday, we'll just use our count here to say, am I getting 1 column or am I getting 4 columns? And then we set up our section. We return the section in this closure. Does that closure, you need to return a section. And at the end of the day, we return the layout. So that's the breadth of the work we'll be doing today. Actually, we have a bit more. We'll add headers as well. But this is going to configure basically our 2 sections. At that point, on step 4, we'll have an app with 2 sections. No header, just 2 sections. So we'll go a step further. After adding our snapshot and everything, we'll subclass the UI collection view reusable view, just a basic view with a text label. We'll set up our supplementary view. We'll register it. Remember, if you're using a cell, you have to register it to the collection view. If you're using a header view, you also have to register it to the collection view. So we'll be registering it programmatically. You could also do it in Storyboard. I think I've done that before with you when we did flow layout. And here, we'll actually have to configure the supplementary view provider, okay? So the data source has this property called supplementary view provider. It takes a closure. That closure has 3 arguments, the collection view itself, the kind of supplementary view you're using. There's multiple types. There's like a footer element type, there's a header, but our case we'll be using a header here, and also the index path. Like what, we always want the index path to know what section we're dealing with, especially if we want to render some header view for each section. And after that, we'll dequeue the item using our type that we subclass, our header view. Then we'll go on to set up the text label. And the text label, so the all cases is coming from the Enum, because now we have a case iterable protocol on it. So we're able to say section.all cases, give me the index path section. And in that case, we're just capitalizing it to make it look better. And the font will make the font dynamic. So if the user wants to render the font bigger or smaller, that just works out of the box. And we return the header view. And lastly, we will go back to our create layout to actually add the header view to the section, okay? So a bit of work, but we'll get through it. And at the end, we'll have some sort of layout that looks like this, where we have two sections. We have a header view, and we have two header views here, but each one just grabs the case name, and it just renders it here. That's why it's capitalized, because the Enum case is lowercase, so we just capitalize it here, and this is what we'll end up having. Any questions before we get started? Okay, so let's get started. You could continue using your, you could do one of two things. You could continue using the app from yesterday and create a tab controller like we did here. But let's just create a new app, actually, make it easier. So that way, because remember, the more you do something for the first time, or the more you do as you're learning, the better. So in that case, let's just create a new app, and we'll call it multiple sections, and we will continue on building our app out. All right. So let's go to Xcode and get started. Give me a second. Let me just take a next screenshot here of folks in here. All right. I'll slack out a resource, one of the APIs we'll be using today, which would be a bit handy when we go over it. I do have it in the lesson, but I'll just slack it out as well. All right. So we'll create a new project. It's a single view app. We'll call it multiple sections. I'm tempted to put compositional layout on the end of this, but multiple sections is fine. Storyboard, and that's it. Remember to push your code as you build in. I mean, as you're working on stuff. I've been going through some GitHubs and I don't see anything happening there. So remember to always push work up. For yourself first, and for people looking at your work. And feel free to also add a Readme and describe what you're doing. Again, for you first, for your own knowledge, and for people prying.
Alex.
Right. Yes.
Just kind of I guess this is kind of like a silly question in a way, but like for commits, is there such a thing as like a commit that's like too small? Like I think sometimes I think to myself like, oh, I haven't done anything like meaningful enough to warrant like a major change like on my GitHub, and like that limits me from like making more commits. Should I be like making commits whenever I like change a UI element, or should it be like when I add a new feature?
If you're always in Xcode every day, you should be committing every day, right? Like no matter how small the commit is, like you work on some app, you fix the constraints, you change some color, commit your code.
Okay, yeah.
Right, like commit your code, push it up. Yeah, just get in the habit of doing that. And nothing is too small, right? Because if you made a change, I mean, there's one way. There's one thing if you're trying to game some system, which is not what you're doing.
No.
Yeah, but if but if you're working on your project, feel free to push as much as you can.
Okay. All right.
Yep. Especially when we're working on DSAs. Like some people work on DSAs in a silo locally, but they never push their work. I really recommend pushing your DSA work to GitHub. Right? Like you work on some problem. Go ahead, Eric.
If you push to a private repo, it does not show the commits on your like your activity, right?
No, it does.
It does.
If I go to mine here somewhere, by the way, I know
Alex, it actually doesn't. It'll show it on you.
No, it won't show. 1 second. Let me just verify what Eric is saying. So it will show. Is that what you're talking about here, Eric? Will it show here? Yeah, it will show here. So just make sure that your contribution settings is checked for private contributions.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
Because I mean, the majority of stuff I have there is private contributions, right?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Very welcome. Matt, does that clear your question as well?
Yeah, I didn't know about the contribution setting. That's very helpful.
Yeah, I think I showed that before, but yeah, definitely you want to toggle that on. And the next thing I said yesterday, feel free to add a Readme. Yesterday, I showed that. Not showed that, but I slacked it out. So you could add a Readme here to make your GitHub even more spicy. Some people actually do GIFs here as well. Like if I was to go to followers, even following, like if I go to orders, GitHub, he actually has a GIF here. You see? So those are the things you could do to make your thing personal. And this guy also has a Readme here, right? So feel free to add a Readme. Like this is the first place people jump on when they're looking at your work. So make sure you have a bio of sorts, whatever you're working on, whatever you see yourself as far as like developer is concerned. If you have Twitter handles or website, whatever, put it here. And we have 6 pins. Make sure we put 6 pins here. I see some people having 2 pins or whatever. And don't put any assignment work here, like assignment 5 or iOS lab 1, right? Like don't put that here. Just put projects you're proud of here. Does that make sense? Yes? All right, cool, awesome. Awesomeness. Let's go back to multiple sections. And what are we starting? Let us start with our view controller. All right, our view controller doesn't have anything much here. Let's go to our main storyboard. So in our main storyboard, we'll add a collection view. Let's find the collection view and drag it over to our scene and set the constraints on it. It's gonna be 0 all around, like we did yesterday. So 0 everywhere. And add for constraints. We don't have a cell yet, okay. You could grab your label cell from yesterday, everybody. We had a label cell yesterday, so just grab that. So let's go ahead and create a new file. And we'll call it label cell. That's okay. Label cell. And we'll just copy the code here because we have that from yesterday. There's no need to redo it. And I'll also paste it into the link into Slack here. So this is what we have, label cell. I will paste it into Slack. All right, so we have our label cell, paste it in, build, whoa, UI kit, come back. All right, build, make sure you have no errors like I just had. And then we will continue on. I'll wait for everybody to have that in there. How are we doing? We good? All good?
Yep.
All right, cool, awesome. So we have our label cell. We are good to go. We could go back to storyboard, click on our cell, go to the identifier. So make sure you click on the cell, not the collection view, the cell. And the inspector will come up. Two things we gotta change. One, we have to change the class. Here we're looking for the label cell. So type in label cell, press enter. And second, we wanna give it an identifier. So click on the attributes inspector and put in label cell. Whatever you put in here, make sure that you know if it's a comma case or whatever. So it's gonna be the same for the view controller when we try to dequeue it. So we have our label cell identifier and our superclass is label cell. So we'll continue clicking option click on the view controller, option click on the view controller. That'll bring up our assistant editor. And now we could control drag from our collection view over to our view controller and call this collection view. Okay. And that's all we need to do for our scene in our storyboard. So we could close out storyboard. And back in our view controller, we have our collection view. And now we'll continue very similar to what we did yesterday. We'll set up or configure our collection view. We will set up our enum cases, which is slightly different from what we did yesterday. So let's go ahead and start. If you're following along with the lesson, we'll actually try to do it chronologically. That way, if you have to do it again, it's very similar. So we'll start from step one. Step one, we create an enum. I'll actually just put step one here as well. We create an enum, we call it section. It has a raw value type int, and it also conforms to case iterable. Our section has two, sorry, does not conform. Our section, our collection view will have two cases. We have a grid and we have a single column. Okay. So we have two cases. Again, you could have more cases for your challenge to do. Add a third section. We'll create a computed property that just returns us some int value based on the case. So we'll just call this property column count. It returns an int value. We'll switch on our self. Self here represents the instance of the enum. So self represents the instance of. So we'll switch on self and we'll say if case is grid, return 4. If case is single, return 1. Okay, and then 4 here represents 4 columns, and 1 here represents 1 column. Okay. If we have to go back to the lesson, what does that mean? I'll come back to the code. But if we go back to the lesson, so if we have a grid, it returns 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we have single, it returns 1 column, takes up the entire group. So this is what we have. So far, so good?
Yep.
All right, cool. Moving on to step 2, we will declare our collection view, which we did already. So we'll just put step 2 here. And we'll also declare our data source. And we'll use type alias here. We'll call it data source. You could call it anything you want, but data source is pretty applicable here. And our data source actual type is UI collection view diffable data source. Very similar again to UI table view diffable data source. Takes into arguments. The first one is the section identifier. which is the section enum here. You could call it anything you want, by the way, like we always do. And the second identifier is the item identifier. In that case, our data will just be an int, like we did yesterday, very similar. But this could easily be your own custom type, like person or whatever custom type you have, recipe, right? But in our case, we just have some simple data type, int, but remember they both have to conform to hashable. So both has to conform.
Alex,
Yes.
can you please make the fonts a little bit bigger?
Bigger, sure. I was trying to hold out to that one for last minute. Bigger. Okay, cool. That woke me up. Okay, so here we are. So both, let me close the navigator window. So both arguments needs to conform to hashable. You see that? Also, this is my typo when I make it bigger. Old age, it's creeping up. All right, so here we are. We have our data source, and this is that. Now, lastly, we haven't declared our data source. This is just a type alias. Let's create a private variable called data source, which is of type data source. Right? So no longer do I have to type this everywhere I need it. I just type in data source here, which is the type alias here. So this is our step 2. Any questions? All right, so we're getting into the meat of this lesson in step 3. So step 3, this is where we create the layout for the collection view. We'll create our layout first before we actually configure our collection view, because our collection view will need that layout. What's the default layout right now for our collection view? Because we set it up in Storyboard.
Flow layout.
Flow layout, very good. So default layout is flow layout. Very good, thank you, Oscar. Moving on to step 3, we'll create a private function here. We'll call it create layout. It returns a layout, UI collection view layout. And as opposed to yesterday what we did, we created our item, we created our group, we created our section, and we return the layout, right? Today, we'll be using a closure to set up our sections, because we have 2 sections. We want to make them look different. So we'll be using what's known as the section provider or the compositional layout provider to configure our sections. So we'll start off by creating a layout constant here. We'll use UI collection view flow layout. Right. And here, if we look at yesterday, UI collection view, not flow layout, sorry. Positional layout. So yesterday what we did, we used this second initializer here, which only took in the section. At the end, when we were ready to create the layout, we pass in our section like that, right? And we just return the layout like that. This is what we did yesterday. Maybe I'll leave that here, just for our reference. So this is what we did yesterday after creating the item, after creating the group, after creating the section, we had the section, we pass in the section to the initializer for the compositional layout, and we return the layout. This is what we did yesterday. Today, we'll be doing it slightly different. We'll be saying layout first, using the UI compositional layout. And this time the initializer, it's not the section, it's not the first one that says section, layout section. It's going to be the one that says section provider here. Do everybody see section provider?
Yeah.
Not the one that accepts the configuration, but the first one that just accepts the section provider, right? So press enter and enter again. And here, like we did in the lesson preview, we have 2 arguments. The first one is the section index. So we'll just say section index here. And the second one is the layout environment, which tells us what device or what device class we have. So then we could even go further and make our layout even more dynamic by placing more items if it's on a bigger screen. Okay, so this is what we have. So now we're in a closure. Now in a closure, we have to return, you see now we have two errors. We have to return a section here somehow. And here we return the layout. So those are the two things we have to return, right? So this error goes away, but the section is not done. This is what we have to do all our work, right? So at the end of the day, we have to return a layout because this is what our function says it's returning. But inside our closure, we have to return a section, okay? Great. All right, so let's continue on. We have our enum. Our enum has two cases. We want to figure out what.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which compositional layout did you select? I think I
The
missed
section provider, another one is the section configuration.
Okay.
Very good. And then it has two arguments. The first one is the section index. The second one is the layout environment. So those we just put in our own argument names. Cool?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So let's continue on. So here, find out what section we. Right. So here we'll use a guard, and we'll use the initializer to create a section using the raw value of the index we have here. So here we'll say section type. We'll use our enum initializer that takes in a raw value. This raw value is an int. And if we go back to our enum has a raw value of int. So now we could construct a section using some int value. It is optional because, hey, if we put in 5, this is not valid, right? I only have 0 and I have 2, right? Everybody remember back in default, right? The default, if I use int, is 0 and 1, yes?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So all that is coming together. So here we are. I'm gonna use my initializer that takes in a raw value. It's expecting an int argument. That int argument is going to be the section index, right? Because the section index is, what's the two values of my section index? The two valid values?
0 and 1.
0 and 1, right? Because we have two sections here. Very good. So if we get here, I'll just return nil. If we get outside of our guard statement, that means we have a valid section type. So now we could continue on. So here, how many columns? So I'll just create a columns constant. And I will say section type, get me your column count, right? So column count is this computed property we have. It will get us the column count. Either it is 1 or 4 columns. Right. So there we are. So we have enough information now to make our section dynamic, whichever way we want it to be. So we could continue on. So the first step, well, now we're actually creating the layout. And the layout, what's the smallest part of the layout? The item, very good. And the item goes in the
group.
In the group, very good. And the group goes into the section. And at the end of the day, we have a layout. Very good, awesome. So the first thing we'll create is the item, but before the item, we need an item size. So let's go ahead and create the item size. And to create the item size, we'll use ns collection layout size. which takes two arguments, a width and a dimension. For the width, we'll use fractional width. We'll say go ahead and take up the entire group. And for the height, we'll do the same thing. We'll say fractional height. We'll say go ahead and take the height of the entire group. Okay? So this is our default item size. So now we could construct our item. We use NS collection layout item. That takes in the size. We pass in our item size here. Great. I'm not going to do the content inserts yet, very similar to yesterday, so that we could take a look at what it looks like, and then we'll go ahead and add. So to do, I'll just put to do here, add content inserts item. Okay, so we have our item. Great, let's go on to our group now. So to get to our group, we want it to be dynamic with the case columns, whether it be 1 or 4. So we'll go ahead and create like a group height constant to figure out, is my column 1, what should it be? So in that case, I'll use a ternary operator. I'll say if columns, right, this columns constant here on line 56, if columns equal to 1, right, if I have 1 column, right, what am I doing? Well, my height will be, I'll actually construct a height using NS collection dimension, NS collection layout dimension. This is the same types of the width dimension here and the same type of the height dimension. The type is NS collection layout dimension. So we'll construct one using absolute. This is the first time we see absolute here. Absolute basically is a hard-coded value. In that case, I'll say, give me all the time 200 points high. If it's 1 column, make it 200 points high, right? If it's not 1 column, then we could say NS collection dimension. In that case, we'll make it fractional height of 0.25. Is it? I think I probably want width here instead. Do I care? Yes, I do care. I'll make this width, and then I'll go over this on Y. Width. Okay. So the first case, if it's 1 column, make the height 200 points. If it's not 1 column, what do we want to do? It's probably better illustrated with the diagram. I'll come back to the code. Let's go to the lesson. So here, if it's 1 column, make it, so focus on number 13 here, the single section here. If it's 1 column, I want the height to be 200 points. If it's not 1 column, I want the height to be 1/4 the width of my section. Very similar to what we did yesterday. Everybody with me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is why we say width here. The fractional width is the container of the group. In that case, the container of the group is what? What's the container of the group? What's the group's container?
Section.
Section. Very good. Very good. The group belongs to the section. What's the group? What's the container of the item?
Group.
Group. Very good. So what's the container? The group. Very good. So anytime we're setting up the layouts, always remember it's relative to the container. The item here, it's relative to the group. The group is relative to the section. Very good. Thank you, Luba. All right, so we have our item, we have our group height. Let's go on to construct the group size. So here, let group size equal to, again, we'll use NS layout item size, takes in a width and a height. For our width, we'll say the width is the group size. Right here, sorry. Group size, we'll make it fractional width we'll make it the entire width of the section. And the group height, we'll just pass in group height here. Group height, group height. So the width of the group is the entire width of the section. Okay? It just takes up the entire span. So here we have the group size. We are done. We could create our group. NS collection layout group.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Are we working on the same project from yesterday?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Are we working on the same project from yesterday?
We started a new project. So Xcode new project. And we call it multiple sections.
Okay.
Anybody maybe Slack out the code we have so far to Tiffany? All right, cool. So we have our group. Let's go ahead and set it up. So we'll use a horizontal line layout. So we'll say horizontal here, and we'll actually use the second initializer, not the first initializer like we did yesterday. We'll use the second one because this time we'll take the count. The count will be columns, basically. So here we pass in our group size. The second argument is going to be the item, and the third argument will be columns. Okay. So here again, the columns could be 1 or 4. Okay. Any questions so far before we continue on? Almost done with the layout here. Next, we'll go set up our section. NS collection layout section. This takes in our group. We pass in our group here. And like that, we have no more errors here. That's good. Let me make sure I could render the whole thing on screen almost for us to see. 1 second, let me clear up some white space. Okay, almost the whole thing. Right? Is that good for everybody to see?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, cool. So slightly different from what we did yesterday, a little bit more dynamic, just because we want our sections to be different. But apart from that, it's very similar to what we did yesterday. The procedure is always the same, like item first, then group, then section, then you return some sort of layout, very similar. If there's anything in between you want to do as far as like custom logic, which we're doing today, then you just do it based on whatever logic you want. In our case, we just want the cells to be differently sized. Feel free to ask any questions as people are still typing.
Could I see the let layout line?
Let layout. So let layout is a constant that expects the closure. 1 second. I'll come right back, everybody. This guy here.
Yeah.
So we have our constant here. We have our initializer. Sorry. We have our initializer that takes the closure, the section provider, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the 2 arguments. First one, section index, second one, the layout environment.
Okay, I got it.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that's almost to the end of the function right here. If I could keep it right here, then everybody could see. We good? Almost, couple more minutes.
I'm good.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. I will continue on. If anybody else needs time, let me know, or else I'll continue.
Just to be, we just did the collection view programmatically like yesterday, right?
No,
I mean, not
yeah.
programmatically in the storyboard, right?
Yeah, in storyboard, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Amadi
Yes.
sent me the code, so I'm pretty much up to date.
Very good. The only thing we really created so far is the create layout function. It may look like a lot here. You have the enum, yes? Okay, cool. So let's continue to step 5. I really want to keep close to the lesson. That way we could go back and review it if we need to. So step 5 is, no, step 5, step 4 is configure the collection view, which we haven't done yet. Let us do it above the create layout function right here. I know it's not in order, but that's okay. Let's configure our collection view right here. Configure collection. And again, our collection view is set up already, right, in storyboard. But here we want to override, actually, override the default layout from flow layout to compositional layout. And again, if you're doing this programmatically, it would look like this. UI collection view. Use the frame. You don't need to type it out. Actually, type it out just for your notes. And you'll pass in create layout here. That's it been done programmatically. Done. But here we're coming from storyboard. So we'll say collection view dot collection view flow layout. What's the flow layout of that collection view? And now we could reassign it by calling our create layout. So we reassigned it, and we'll just give it a background color. I'll say very similar to what we did yesterday. Let's first give it an actual brighter color to make sure we see our collection view. Red. And we'll come back, we'll change this once that's rendered. And in our view did load, let's call configure collection view. And let's run the app. Come back over here, sir. Okay, so there we go. Collection view takes up the entire device and it's red. Great. So let me change that to background color. All right, everybody got the collection view rendered correctly?
Mine is still trying to run.
Okay, there's no Firebase there, right?
I put in like 12 Cocoa Pods.
Very good, very good. All right, I'll give us a couple of seconds to get all ready. And then we'll go on to configure the data source because we have no data yet. All that stuff was just setting up layouts. We have no data. So we need to set up the data source or configure the data source. Everybody good? Got the collection views colored? Yes?
Yep.
All right, cool. So let's go on to configuring the data source. Let's go at the bottom of our class here. And this is step 5. All right, we'll say private function configure data source. Data source. Right, our data source is nil. We want to configure it. We'll use our type alias, right? So instead of saying UI collection view I could just say data source. That's my type alias. And open parens and start typing in collection. Press enter. And here we have our cell provider. So first argument is collection view. Our cell provider has 3 arguments, collection view again. So I just name it collection view. Second argument is the index path. Third argument is the actual item. In our case, the item is an int. So here we'll configure our cell, configure the cell. Collection view, we have our custom cell. So let's go ahead and get our custom cell by using the guard statement. So we'll say guard let cell equal to collection view dot dequeue. We're not dequeuing the supplementary view, that's for later. Dequeue cell. So dequeue reusable cell. Reuse identifier, make sure that's the same as storyboard. This is the way I wrote mine in storyboard. And then index path. And we have to use typecasting. So as question mark, the type I'm expecting is a label cell. And I'll say else, if I do not get it, go ahead and let me know with a crash. So here I'll say could not dequeue label cell. Everything went great on line 95. I have my cell. I could simply return my cell. But before I return my cell, I want to set it up, right, with some sort of label. So I'll say cell.text label.text equal to string interpolation here, and I'll say item. That item is coming from that item here, right? So the item is just a value, an integer, so I'm string interpolating it. Or we could have done item.description, which is fine, right? So here, item. Great, so we have our item, we could give it a color, cell. Actually, we could do 2 things. We could give it 2 colors here. So what we could do, we could say if index path dot section equal to 0, right? This is the first section. And this is all the sections. In that case, we only have 2 sections. If it's the first section, go ahead and make the cell background color system orange. You feel free to use whatever colors you want. If it's my second cell, I'll say cell.background color equal to system green. Right. So we have 2 sections. We'll just make the cells different. But that could be easily be in a function somewhere that you just call, say, configure cell with this item, configure cell with that item. But here we'll just simply change the colors of the cells. Great. Well, we're not done. That's just setting up the data source, right? Data source. We still need to give it actual data. So we'll say set up initial snapshot. Can I scroll a little bit? If I scroll here, are we okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the snapshot, we'll say var snapshot, and we'll say ns. We can't use our type alias here because it's a different type. Ns diffable data snapshot, and we still expect a section. This also needs to match the data source or you'll get compiler errors. So it needs to match the 2 types, and we'll have our initializer. Scrolling down, let me know if I'm going too fast here. I'll scroll down right here. Snapshot, this is very similar to what we've been doing with table views and yesterday. Not snapshot, sorry. Data source. I want to apply the snapshot to the data source to update my table view. And here I'll say animated differences, false. We could put animations if you want, but you just have to be careful where you put it. Is it in the view did load or not? Snapshot, use of unresolved snapshot. Okay. We have 2 sections. We'll just populate it with arrays of just like numbers. but this could easily be data that you get from a web API. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And somebody please remind me, because yesterday I said I was going to show it, but I did not have the time, not even the time, I forgot. But please somebody remind me to show duplicate entries in sections, because we'll get a warning if we do that. Actually, let me do it first. That way I don't forget. So first we'll add our sections. Normally we've been adding one section, but today we'll add two sections right away. So we'll say snapshot.append sections. You see our section 6 in an array, and it knows the type. It's expecting section type. So here I could pass in an array. And here we have the first one, which is the grid. And the second one we have is single. So those are my two sections. Next, I will populate each section. I'll say snapshot dot. I'll use the initializer that takes in two arguments. The first one being the identifiers, and the second one being the section you want to append to. So the first one here, I'll say array. I'll create an array on the fly of items, of numbers. I'll start from 1, and I'll say give me numbers up to 12. So it starts from number 1, including 12, right? So this is our close range, right? Include all those numbers. So I'll get an array of 1 to 12. Into what section do I want to put it in? I want to put it into my grid. Okay. Next, I'll say snapshot dot append, this time array again. And just to get that warning happening, I'll say start from 12, go up to 20. And I want to put it into my single section. Okay. We'll get a warning here because we have 12 already. This is why the diffable data sources tells you that types needs to be hashable, because it will identify really quickly if you're trying to add a duplicate entry. Everybody with me?
Yes.
All
Where
right,
is
cool.
the wording?
When we run the app,
Oh, okay.
we'll sit in the console.
Mm-hmm.
So can I scroll up to the video load, or are we still typing?
Yeah.
Scroll up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in viewed load, let's call our configure data source. Okay, call your configure data source and run the app. Don't think we forgot anything. Okay, my app runs, right? And already we're seeing things that's kind of weird here. So in the console, everybody saw the console error, or the warning rather.
Yeah.
Right, it says 12 inserted, identifiers already present, existing items will be moved into place, da, da, da. Please note this will impact performance. This is telling us 12 was added already. It's a duplicate item. So we need to be careful. That's why it's hashable. It tells us right away, like, hey, you creating something that's added already. So let's fix that. I'll start from 13 here, and let's run our app again. And we shouldn't have any warnings in our console now, right? Everything renders correctly. But before we continue on, we want to add some spacing between the items, right? Because everything is like line on top of the other, right? So we want to add some spacing between the items. This is where the content inserts will come in. Is everybody getting the collection views to render two sections?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's add some section insets, or rather some content insets for the item. Let's go to our to-do on line 74. So I'm inside of the create layout, and right after let item equal, we have a to-do here. Let's add our content insets. So item.content insets takes in NS direction edge insets, right, from yesterday. So it takes in NS directional edge insets, which takes 4 arguments, a top padding, leading, trailing, bottom. So we'll just put 5 all around. And we'll run our app again. Great. So this looks better. And we're able to see all our items. We stopped on 20, and we are good here. Okay, great. But we have 2 sections. It would be nice to let the user know, hey, we have 2 sections. Let them know what the titles are, or what the, give them some section headers, okay? So the breadth of our lesson is done as far as like we have multiple sections, but now we could go further and we could add headers for each section. This is where the supplementary header will come in, okay? Are we good to continue here? That might take us like 30 more minutes. We're good?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we'll add the supplementary section headers, and yeah, so there we go. Actually, to make it a bit faster, we know how to write programmatic UI. Actually, everybody has access to the lesson, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so go to the lesson, go to 6, go to section 6 in the lesson. So let me show us here. Go to section 6 in the lesson and just grab our header view, copy it, because we did that yesterday already, minus like saying UI collection view reusable view. Just copy it. And let's create a new file. So create a new file. Cocoa Touch class, just for us to know exactly where that view is going to be coming from. Cocoa Touch class. Click next. That's there already by default. So type in UI collection reusable view. Do we get access to UI collection view reusable view? UI collection reusable view.
Yep.
Okay, very good. And then the class name, we'll just call it header view. So in order for you to work with supplementary views, you need to subclass UI collection reusable view, right? Very similar to like UI collection view cell. This is a UI collection reusable view. They basically work the same way, just different subclasses.
Hi, Alex. I'm on the lesson. Sorry to interrupt you, and I don't see the.
You need to click on multiple sections. So go to the root folder of the repo, and you'll see multiple sections as one of the the files. Yeah, yeah. And then go to number 6.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Right.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Okay, so here
and
we
get
are.
Subclass UI collection. Okay, duh. Yeah.
Yeah. We're gonna override it, but I also wanted to make us be able to see how to create it from scratch. But basically, just like paste over this. It's the same thing. Build. Make sure you have no errors. So this is our normal programmatic view setup. We have a text label here. We set up the constraints for it. It's centered, and we give it some padding. That's what we have here. Nothing extra here. Well, this is dynamic font, right? As opposed to like hard coding a font. So that makes it easier. So accessibility becomes really quick, really accessibility by default. If you say, make my font preferred font here. Okay, cool. So let's continue on to our view controller. So this was step 6. If you keep in track with the lesson, now we need to go to step 7. Step 7, we need to register the view or that supplementary view. So in our view controller, let's go to configure data source. Let me move this aside for a second. Right here is fine. Let's go to configure data source. No, let's go to configure collection view first, sorry. Configure collection view. So in our configure collection view, we could register the supplementary view in storyboard, but here we register the supplementary. So collection view dot register. So again, you could register many things on the collection view. You could register a cell, a nib, right? In our case, we want to register a reusable view, supplementary view. And I'm seeing everything here because this font is so big. Let's see. Ah, I got it correctly. You want to use the one that says supplementary view of kind, or the initializer. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay. And where it says view class, you'll put in header view dot self. For the supplementary view kind, let me get some more space here. For the supplementary view kind here, it's expecting a string, but we will pass in UI collection. I'm sorry? Was there a question?
No.
Okay. UI collection view element kind header, right? There's a footer. I could also have a footer to my collection view, and I could have a header. In our case, we want to have a header. So you want to say element kind section header, right? And for the reuse identifier, here we'll just say header view and build. Okay. Good. Great. So we have our collection view. We've registered the supplementary view. Now we could continue on. So that's step 8. No, not step 8. I'm going ahead of myself. This is step 7. Now let's go to, actually I could put 8 here, step 7, sorry. Yeah, 7 here. And let's go to step 8 now. We need to go back to our configure data source. So let's go back to configure data source. All the work we're doing now is just for the headers. So just keep track of that. So now we'll go back to our configure data source. And we'll go to, if we're keeping track, we have 2 steps here inside of our configure data source. We'll add a 3rd step. And here we'll actually work with the supplementary view provider, okay? And that's one of the API documentation links I sent you, just to keep track of what we'll be doing. Actually, let me click on it so I could kind of show you. Let me go to the lesson before I do the code. So we're about to do step 8 here. We're about to set the data source supplementary view provider, and it takes in 3 arguments. The first argument is a collection view. Second is the kind, what type of supplementary view you have. Is it a header? Is it a footer? And the last is the index path. So this is a closure. So the supplementary view provider takes a closure. If I go to the documentation, so here, the Apple documentation, this is what it looks like. And so we have our view provider, and it takes in 3 arguments, the collection view, some string, which is our element type, and an index path. And here it tells you, it takes a collection view, the kind of supplementary view to provide, and an index path, okay? So this is where we are. All right, cool. So back here. So we'll say data source dot supplementary view provider. Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so this takes a closure. That closure has 3 arguments. First argument, we say collection view. Second argument is the kind of supplementary view to expect. And the third one is an index path. Okay, the index path is going to be very important here in what we're doing. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead and typecast to the header view that we expect. So let's continue on. Don't worry about the errors right now. Those are going to go away as we continue typing. So we'll start off with a guard statement, very similar to our dequeuing for a cell. We'll say header view equal to the collection view. Right? And here we're actually going to be dequeuing, where am I? Dequeuing a supplementary view this time, right? Because this time we're not dequeuing a cell, right? So here we're dequeuing a supplementary view for the collection view. Everybody with me? Yes. Okay. So of kind,
Yeah.
let's pass the kind here. We'll say UI collection view dot element header. Next, we have our header view, and lastly we have index path. And we'll say else. We'll also crash our app here. I'll say could not DQ header view. Okay. A bunch of work, but we got what we want on line 117. We have our header view. Error, else. What is this? Initializer, I'm not typecasting. So else, before my else statement, let me typecast to my header view. Right, if we're not typecasting, it's not an optional, makes sense. So here we have our header view, and now we'll say header view. Get me your text label, and I want to set the text. And what we'll set, basically, we'll just say, get me my section. We have the case iterable, which is very powerful. I'll say all cases, which is an array of sections. I'll index into that array, and I'll say index path dot section. Okay. And then lastly, I'll return the header view. Okay. I'll pause here, make sure if we have questions, we could ask questions, and we need to continue typing out. We're getting very close. There's just two more steps, and then we'll be good to go. Very similar to what we just did above, right? With the cell. This is just a supplementary view. Very similar. Two more steps to go. One is all the work we've done, we haven't actually told the header, we haven't added the header to the section, right? This is just the configuring part, but we need to add the header to the section, which would be the next step. And to add the header, you need to give the header a size. Very similar to the old way. If you did flow layout with supplementary views, you have to return some size for the header on the data source. But here we'll just be doing it with a few lines of code and set the section. And that'll be good. Can we scroll up?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So let us go to create layout. Create layout. And we'll do this right where we have our section here. Can be before the section. Well, could be, but we'll do it after the section. We have our section defined. Let's go ahead and set up or configure first thing we need is a size. Everything starts with a size. So we'll say header size. Again, we're here in the layout. Layout needs sizes of things. So here we need a size. So we'll say NS collection. NS collection layout size. We want it to take up the entire width of the section. So we'll start off by saying fractional width equal to 1.0. And the height, we'll actually use absolute value here. And we'll say 44 points. Actually, not absolute. I don't want it to be hard-coded. I'll say estimated. What do I have in the list? I need to update the lesson to be estimated. Estimated is better here because if the user changes the dynamic font size, then the section will also change. Everybody with me? The header will also change. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Right, so those are the three differences between dimensions. We have, just for review here from what we did yesterday, so size, options, we have fractional, we have absolute, not vodka, this is a family show. And we have,
Oh man.
we have estimated, right? So absolute is a hard-coded number. It's not going to change. Fractional is aspect ratio based on the container. And estimated will start off with a value, and based on the content will change based on the content. As there's more text or the text gets bigger, it's going to change based on that. All right, so we have our header size. Let's continue. Next, let's create the header. All right, our header, wait for it. It's a bit long here. We have NS, collection, layout, boundary. So what you're looking for is NS collection layout boundary supplementary item. I did not name this, sorry. So this is what we have. And the initializer, we're looking for layout size, and we're also looking out for, where is all? The one that has alignment actually, not just size, we also want alignment to let it know where to go. Should I align it at the top? Should I align it at the bottom? Should I align it top left? Right, there's a lot of options there, which is really cool. So we'll say the layout size is the header size, right. Element kind is UI collection view.element header, and alignment will say dot top, right? You see, you could put it at the top, you could put it trailing, you could put it top leading, top trailing, but we just want to put our header view at the top of the section. All right. Yes, Siri?
One moment.
All right. So lastly, we'll say section. We want to add the header to the section. And the way to add it is via the boundary supplementary items array that we spoke about earlier in the lesson. And here we added it as an array. So here I could have a header, I could have a footer, I could have a badge, whatever. But in our case, we only have a header. This is the header. So we add that header to the section, and we return the section like we did before.
What would a badge be?
Like a notification or something like that.
On the cell, on each cell?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Or whatever you want on that cell. It could be
Well,
like
on each section, I mean.
Yeah, it could be a checkbox. It could be anything like that. On each cell, yes.
On each cell, okay, cool.
Yep, yep. All right, so here we are. Let's run this. Am I missing anything? No, I don't think so. Let's run it first and see if I'm missing anything. Let's run it and see what
we have to make these titles look a little nicer.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, it could be fancy. So here we are. We have the titles. So we have our grid. It just comes from the name of the enum again. And then we have single here. Feel free to make it pretty, as Tiffany said. And lastly, the only thing I'll do is make it capitalized for now. So if we go to where we set that up, where am I doing my data source? I return my header view here. You could just put dot capitalized on line 123 where it says text label.text, right? You could just put dot capitalized on that just to make it capitalized. But yes, you could change the font. Remember, our header view is a view, so you could give it a background color, you could give it an image, you could go all out. But we have a to-do, right, Tiff? So you could add a third section, and on that, you could make it look pretty.
Okay.
Right.
I was trying to remember how we do this, the associate values. Again, we could just put, what you call it, in parentheses. We could give it a string. Or how do we do that again? Or we just give it a string name? Or like what it would be?
What are we coming from here?
We're coming from storyboard. Or is that an opportunity?
Like you mean for the string name here?
No, I mean like, well, yeah. So like, we could just capitalize it, but like, let's say I wanted to give it a whole other name. Which one? How do you do the associate values again on the enum, to where I could give it a raw value of a string?
You could do something like this, right?
That's exactly what I meant. Yeah, I just wanted to make okay. And then I could pass in that string.
Yep. Or you could also set it up right here where we have index path. Where's the thing? For the header view here, we're just returning one thing, but you could easily say if index path this, return some string here. Or on the enum itself, you could have like a function that returns some string. You could do a lot of things.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, sir. That's something to well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Very good. Other things we could do here to make this even different, if it's index path, we're changing it to orange already. We could say cell.layer.corner radius equal to like 12 or something, right? That way it's a bit different from the bottom one, right? So it's like, you see? So now it's really distinct.
Yes, I like that. Thank you.
Uh-huh. How's everybody doing? Everybody got our app looking very similar to what we have on screen? Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
What was the last thing you did?
I can't see everybody, so I need voices. Luba, what's your question?
What was the last thing you just did?
Oh, for the corner radius here?
Yeah.
I went to, in the block of code where we are setting up our cell, right? We have a background color, so where it says section equal to 0, I just made the corner radius 12 for the first section, for the first section items.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Any questions? Anybody not got the code to work where we are? We good? All right, so this is the second time we actually use compositional layout. And as you see, the more you write it from scratch, the more it's gonna be part of you. So when we come back again on Monday, we'll write it again. Not this one, but we'll write something different where we could actually scroll horizontally, which we haven't done. So far, we've only been scrolling vertically, but we'll see how cool the new API as far as a compositional layout gives us access to orthogonal scrolling and be able to snap in place, like when you scroll, if you scroll photos or whatever, instead of like, it just like continuously scrolling and the user has to stop, it could scroll based on 1 photo, 2 photos, 3 photos, like a paging type of scrolling. So there's different types of scrolling you can do. There's paging by group, there's paging group centered, there's like really cool things there. So we'll take a look at that next week.
Alex.
Yes, Tiffany and then Kelby.
Really quickly, so you know how we changed the background, like the corner radius, and it's supposed to be for the section 0. It looks like both sections changed their corner radius.
You're right. Yeah. I just saw that actually. I'm like, hey. Let's see. So this guy, that's interesting. Let's do divide the 0 here.
Oh, that fixed it.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. Cool. That was the same question, both you guys?
Yeah.
All right.
I was reading his mind.
Reading minds. Reading minds. Very, very good. So our challenge, or rather extra things there to do at the third section, return whatever you want to return, but just for your own practice, add a third section. That way you get practice there. It's not homework, it's not anything like that. It's just like to confirm your knowledge of what we've been doing. Oh, hey, start from scratch and build a whole different thing. Either or. But do something that enforces what we've learned over the last 2 days. Cool?
Yes.